Welcome to the Queer Spirituality Podcast. I'm your host, Julian Crosson-Hill. This podcast is about an idea. It's the radical idea that queerness is a gift and that the divine celebrates it rather than merely accepts it. We'll explore the special role that queer people are meant to play in the coming spiritual awakening. Through the lives and stories of queer people, we'll explore the many ways of approaching the divine and how the sacred reveals itself in everyday actions. Most of all, this is a podcast about love. It's about the love of the universe, it's about love between people, and it's about the love a community can share with one another. Thank you for joining me. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Queer Spirituality Podcast. I'm your host, Julian Crosson-Hill, and I have a special guest here with me today. Mawiyah Kai EL-Jamah Bomani is an award-winning writer, educator, and spirit woman. Mawiyah is an 8th-generation witch, Egun medium, and priestess of Oya in the Yoruba system of spirituality. She is also editor-in-chief of the Culture and African Traditional Spirituality e-zine, Oya N'Soro. Mawiyah is the host of FishHeadsinRedGravy, a podcast dedicated to celebrating marginalized people of the esoteric occult world. Her writings have appeared in numerous magazines, including the Crab Orchard Review, Dark Eros, and Catch the Fire. She has written several plays, including Spring Chickens, which won her the Southern Black Theater Festival's 2012 to 2013 Playwright of the Year Award. She is also the Critical Mass 8 Literary Award winner and a Cat Artist Residency recipient. Mawiyah currently lives, writes, and conducts Orisha rituals, spiritual consultations, workshops, house cleansings, and divinations in both northern and southern Louisiana. Her book, Conjuring the Calabash, Empowering Women with Hoodoo Spells and Magic. This book is about Black girl magic, queer girl magic, straight girl magic, trans magic, bisexual magic. It's about giving yourself the power to be fierce. Black women are hierophants, magicians, empresses, and high priestesses. And that's a direct quote from Mawiyah. Authentic and unapologetic, this guide to magical spirituality empowers you to take back the power to heal and shine under your own strength. Written by an accomplished Hoodoo practitioner, Conjuring the Calabash features spells, recipes, and rituals that help you rise out of the constrictions around you. Mawiyah Kai EL-Jamah Bomani shows you how to bless your calabash, your sacred womb, with love and reawaken your fullest potential through folk traditions, personal stories, and her favorite songs and pop stars. An inclusive and intersectional voice in contemporary Hoodoo, Mawiyah will help you become your fiercest self. Welcome to the show, Mawiyah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. So I always start by asking my guests what queer spirituality means to them. So I guess we'll start there.
Okay. Well, for me, I think it just means to be inclusive, to have magic that includes everyone so no one feels left out. And myself being an African American person from a marginalized group, I know what that feels like. So I would like to welcome everyone into this magic. So there is no, questioning on your sexuality and things like that. I know from my own upbringing in Orisha work and in Yoruba culture, men as well as women can be mounted by female or male deities. And so that in itself lets me know that there is no separation in terms of, a person's sexual orientation or their love or their belief systems in that. And so it should include all of it, into the magic. And so the magic itself is just the focal point, not who you love, and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. So I'm not very familiar with Hoodoo. I'm going to be honest. I've heard the term and I've heard, voodoo, and I've heard of Yoruba. I've heard of all these different traditions, but I'm not real sure what all the differences are. So can you, for the listeners, kind of give like the quick rundown of what Hoodoo is?
Okay. So as when we think about the transatlantic slave trade, and we think about all of the many Africans who were brought into this place, Western America, there were lots of different for lack of a better phrase, lots of different tribes or different people from different regions. And so with them, they brought their own spiritual practices and their own belief systems. And as that got blended in with Native American beliefs, European beliefs that were already here, trying to figure out how to reconfigure herbs and root work and conjure to fit where we were in this place, Hoodoo was birthed from that. And so it was a form of liberation magic, not just liberation in terms of freeing oneself from bondage, but also because, nobody cared about a Black woman having a baby. So you had to use that conjure and that root work to take care of that process as well. When you got sick on the plantation, all of those things fit into the knowledge that we were pulling from. We like to call it a gumbo of the different spiritual beliefs, African practices, as well as the practices that were already here. So there's still some European influences as well as Native American influences that went into that brew. And so that's what hoodoo is. It is this gumbo of practices that was formed in this Western world to help us liberate ourselves.
Oh, amazing. You explain that so well. And I've heard lots of different people attempt to explain that, but I think that just is really succinct and makes it clear. So, and you've already mentioned, this idea of the orishas, like can ride like a female orisha or a feminine orisha can ride a male. And so, where do queer people really fit into hoodoo? Like, is there any particular philosophy or theory or like, or does it just sort of like not matter?
It just really doesn't matter. The practice itself is about including everyone into it. Males, females, even young children learn from a very early age, how to divine using bones, coins, and different things like that. So the sexual orientation does not play a part in it. There is no dogmatic book that says that you have to do it this way because you're a man or you're a woman, or there's certain things that you can't do. So it doesn't really factor into it. And that's what I find pleasing about a lot of different, African traditional spiritual systems. Even when we move Eastern, right, we have a lot less of that, concern about, the gender roles and your place in the whole scheme of it all.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. What does hoodoo, like what do the hoodoo practices look like? Like when you get together and celebrate, your spirituality, how does that look? Because I think a lot of white people have this image of hoodoo, voodoo, all the African traditions through the lens of Hollywood as this scary thing. So
Right. Well, one of the things people usually want to loop hoodoo and voodoo together. Voodoo is a religious, it's a religious practice. There are initiations that go into that. With hoodoo, it's not so much that. There aren't any initiations. It's about learning, folk magic, and it's the Black people's folk magic. And so we all have our own folk magic systems. And so what it looks like is just, you may use bones for divining, you may use playing cards, right? Now there's certain aspects of it that cater to African American, because of our lineage, because of what we've gone through, like working with an image like La Madama, which would be like a deity in the hoodoo arena. And she represents, when you see a statue of her, she represents more of the African American woman who worked on the plantation inside the home, but who was also a go-between for the Maroons, the Africans who ran away and who were helping other Africans, leave the plantation. So she was kind of like that spy, that go-between for that. To listen, to hear, and to make sure that when the people did leave, that they were provided with food. So in hoodoo, we talked to her a lot today about protection. African American men who fear the police, right? And just, women and our children in general. So we would use her image today to protect us. And so you offer her things like her tools, because she was a master diviner. So you have a deck of playing cards there. And you would kind of read them like the tarot, and see what she would say about your day or what type of protections you would need. And food, she likes cornbread and things like that. So you would leave that out for her as well. So that's what that, so there's certain things I always tell people that are pertinent to the African American experience. And then there are certain things that overlap within folk magic as a whole.
Yeah.
So it may be a folk magic practice that you see that parallels European ideas, like using the playing cards, right? Anybody can do that. She loves divination, so I might put playing cards there. I might put bones, I might put whatever I have, in terms of that day, and use that to figure out how to proceed for myself, my husband, my son, whoever.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And that it's just so like that it's just taught and there's no initiations. It's like there's no gatekeepers. And I love that about
No,
it.
no, no.
Yeah.
And for me, writing a book, I felt like I wanted to delve into a system that was easy access for people so that it wouldn't leave anybody out. Because if you talk about a book about Orisha work or Oya, then that limits the group of people who are going to read it, and who
Yeah.
can feel like they can engage with the magic that's in there. But when you look at hoodoo as a whole, you can practice any system spiritually and still practice hoodoo, the conjure part of it, the root work. There are pockets of it that you can take and implement into your own magical workings. So that's what I enjoy about it. There is no initiation. Anybody can come to it. There's certain things you might feel like that really doesn't speak to me, like in reference back to Lama Dama, but I can still use the playing card aspect of it, things like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds very inclusive. Now, how does it feel to you when white people sort of adopt some of these practices? Because I see that kind of becoming more commonplace where white people are starting to practice these African traditional systems, and it makes me feel a certain way. It makes me feel a little
Right,
uncomfortable. So I'd love to hear your
right,
perspective because obviously,
right.
yeah.
I think if it is something that overlaps, it's okay. Like we talk about using playing cards or using dowsing rods, right? Things like that, they may overlap. But when we get into things like working with Lama Dama or even people like I don't know, even like any of the Maroons, right? And using them as saints or images that we would call on. There's certain things that you shouldn't do because that energy itself in its time and place from its inception came from freedom, a freedom fighting thing that helped African Americans. So what would your connection be to that? So I think that finding what works for you and that is not a specific to that person's problem or that person's situation or subjugation, that's okay. But when it goes against that, then you shouldn't practice it. And I think we all have enough common sense to know, what is an overlap and then what is I need to step back.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
I certainly
Yeah.
hope so. Sometimes I worry that we
Right,
don't
right,
have those
right, right.
boundaries, but
And I,
yeah.
and I talk about that in my book. I talk about another individual like Mother Catherine Seals, who's an African American woman from New Orleans, spiritual community. And she worked with all people, black and white, all of them, because when she went to spiritualist, he turned her away because she was black. He said he didn't serve black people. And so she
Mm,
decided when she would have her place, her spiritual compound, that she would welcome all people. So I always say, okay, you can work with Mother Catherine Seals, right? Because her
yeah.
history is one of working with everyone. But then there are certain people that you know that you may not feel that connection to. It may not be that space for you. So yeah, and like you, it makes me feel uncomfortable when I see people just kind of like with this idea that I'm going to force myself on these deities or on this system, and that just shows appropriation and not appreciation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes in our privilege, we forget to let the people who own those traditions do the speaking, or the people who are
Right,
being repressed and are fighting for the freedom
right,
to have their own words. We don't need to speak for
right,
them. I mean, yeah, we want to hold space for them to do that. And I
right,
see this in
right.
the queer community because I think we have a inclusion problem in the gay community. It's a lot of affluent white men, gay men
Mm-hmm,
who are sort
mm-hmm,
of running things, and
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
oftentimes people of color who are queer feel excluded. And
Right.
and part of my work is how do we make that more inclusive. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
because
understand. I definitely understand that because I know, like, when my daughter, who is also queer, was looking for events where we live, and she didn't feel comfortable. She didn't feel welcome because, like you say, it was a lot of affluent men, white men, who were saying, we're going to have this on this day, and there wasn't really a board that was working together to make the Pride, Day
yeah,
a success. So it was like, I will just stay home, kind of.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's sad because we need to create space for all queer people
Hmm.
because,
Hmm.
already gay men are at such risk, from the police and from violence, and then to also be gay and a person of color
Right.
is
Right.
really
Right.
we haven't made an easy path for people. And I think, it really
Hmm.
should be the role of us in that are leading to be creating that bigger table, right? So everyone has a
Right,
seat at the
right,
table.
right,
Yeah.
right, 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 right. And so often, you find where, people who've been oppressed, they started trying to turn it on themselves and become the oppressor a lot of times when they feel that they're in these spaces of authority where they can have this control. I want more control because I've never control, and it's
Yeah.
sad, but I see that a lot, so yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, I think that's a really great observation about the way that, gay men, white gay men who felt oppressed for being gay have kind of turned that
Hmm.
to, well, now
Hmm.
I'm going to oppress the other the other gays
Right,
that,
right,
yeah.
right, 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 right,
Yeah.
right,
That's
right, right,
amazing.
right.
Yeah, that's a powerful observation. Thank you for that. So your book is geared towards women, and you specifically say, queer women, trans women, straight women, and then you mentioned calabash being the sacred womb. And of course, there's been controversy in the spiritual community in the past about women's mysteries and trans women being excluded
Hmm.
because they
Hmm.
weren't
Hmm.
biologically women.
Right, with the
And
womb. Yes, 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 yes,
yeah.
yes.
So how do
Yeah,
you address that
yeah.
in your work?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for me, when I speak of womb, it's a layered thing. It could be just the womb for a woman. We're talking biologically, but also I'm talking about the spirit, the heart, the seat of where we allow our spirituality to grow. That's more or less what I'm speaking of. So that's the inclusiveness of it. I'm not just talking about because you're born a woman, but the spirit of everything that you do, the spirit that lies in your magic, that lies in your, how you process the world, how you engage and how you make sure that you're heard, you're seen. That's what I'm talking about, the spirit of it all. So that is that spiritual womb space that we all have, right? And so
Yeah.
that's what I mean. It's not just about a woman having a womb, because you could have a woman and she not be aware, she not be someone who is willing to speak out and speak up for herself. So that soul space is what I mean when I say the womb. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. There's a part in the introduction to the book where you specifically say this was written for people with feminine bodies, even if it's in or feminine spirits, even if they're in a masculine body. And that really spoke to me that you were
Mhm,
so
mhm, mhm,
inclusive
mhm,
just right there in the
mhm,
introduction.
mhm,
So
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, because I think about just that feminine energy, that mothering, that nurturing of our desires, that nurturing of our goals. That's what I'm speaking of. A lot of times we have this tendency to associate that with a feminine. Men are nurturing too, can be, right? And so it's just that idea of nurturing our desire in such a way that we allow that soul space to come alive, and that makes that womb blossom for us and gives us a chance to birth creative ideas, even if we don't birth a physical child. Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing. I love that because I always used to, sort of talk about creation versus procreation because they're
Mm-hmm.
very
Mm-hmm.
similar, but a different like energetic level, really. So I
Right, right,
love
right,
that.
right,
Yeah.
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, amazing. Um, there's so much like going on in the world right now. It's kind of a scary place to be a person of color, to be LGBTQ. What's sort of your
Mm-hmm.
advice for people to navigate this? Because I think a lot of people are feeling very anxious, especially as we approach an election year that could really be
Mm-hmm.
consequential for, both people of color and LGBTQ
Mm-hmm.
people. What's sort of your advice? Like, what would you sort of tell people to help them feel better about or feel more empowered in
I-
this?
I'm thinking, to allow yourself to be grounded more, to be more connected to the earth and less connected to social media and
Yeah.
all forms of media, just to become more connected with nature and the world. And then it'll be an easier way to process how you deal with everything. I think we get more fearful when we tune in too much to all of this. Who's next? Who's coming up next? Is this person coming back? What's happening politically? Those kind of things. And I think for me, being grounded, touching the earth with your feet, using those bells and things like that to just awaken your senses and your spirit. Pulling a card a day, doing some tarot, or if you want to do Lenormand, do that, and just getting in tune with the spirit and not so much the dogma of religion. And I think that that will help us to better process whatever comes. We can't change what's going to happen right then and there. If it happens, we can't change it. It's already happened. We can move forward and process it a little bit differently, and so that we don't internalize those things. So I always start with being grounded. Whatever you do, you wake up in the morning, get a cup of coffee, say it, whisper some words into that coffee, and you even into the coffee ground, the water before you put it in the machine, whisper some words of affirmation for yourself, for your community, and then have a drink, share a drink, with someone else. And so it's those little things that we do, I think, within our own community, and then it starts to branch out. And I say, start there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such great advice. Absolutely. And definitely, like, the more you tune into the news, the more, it's almost like news has been designed to induce anxiety in people.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like
Yeah.
if they can't do that, then there's no news, right? They're not happy. You
Right.
can watch them, right? The
Right.
weatherman on. It's like they don't want to tell you it's going to be a beautiful day. That's not what they want. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned community several times. So obviously community is very important to you. What This is something that I kind of struggle with in my own work is younger queer people who have always sort of felt more mainstreamed now, that
Mhm.
sometimes don't feel the necessity to find queer community. They don't find the necessity for spiritual community. They just feel like, well, I fit everywhere. And, but do they really, is kind of the question. And also, if you're not in a queer community that's like preserving the history and remembers where we've come from, there's always the potential that we'll end up back there. Right. And so
Right,
I'd
right,
love to hear
right.
what community means to you, and what you get from community yourself.
For me, I know even in the African American community, spiritual community with Ifa, with Hoodoo, whatever voodoo, same thing. You watch these TikToks, and a lot of times they feel like they know it all, and they don't need that. To me, it's just I might type in a quick post about someone historically, who practiced, or something that Zora Neale Hurston said, a quote from her book, and put that up there. And you find that a lot of people, they resonate with it, even a lot of the younger people, and they'll go and they'll ask about that book. Where can I get that book? Or can we have a book talk on that? So things like that, trying to have, I usually have, I have about 5 young women that I'm working with now, and we're centered around this book called The Devil is Nothing But a Five-Letter Word. And so we talk about, our understanding of ancestors, because for a lot of them, there's this idea about making a beautiful altar, but not really knowing how to connect with it. And I think some
Mhm.
of those things you can only get from community. And so we talk about that. We read chapters, we come back and discuss, what did you feel about that? There's some ancestral work that has to be done. So for me, a lot of it is good to use the internet for a lot of that connection. But a lot of times I was just throw out a quick post or something, and they pick it up and they want to know. And even if they don't credit you with it, they come up with it like they discovered it. That they've reached out for that information. And so it allows it to live and to linger long after, any of us. And so I think for a lot of them, they want to know. They just don't want to be preached at, and that's with all of
Yeah.
our communities, right? They want to know the information, but they don't want, just like us, right? But they don't want to sit in a church. They don't want to feel like they're having to sit in a church, or sitting in a science lecture hall and being talked to. They just want to be able to experience the information and to use it and move on in their way, which is right now a lot of TikTok, right? those ways. And
Yeah.
that's fine because it's allowing them to really hone in on their magic, and to start to feel comfortable about it. But it doesn't disavow anything that's happened in the past, because you can still shoot that information out there. So that's what I've been doing. And from that information, like I say, I've been able to form study groups, and we just talk about the chapters. It's not anything where I'm acting like some instructor, but just to get them to really understand that there's a basis in this. And you need to understand who came before you, and pay some
Yeah.
reverence to those individuals. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I teach myself, and I always, even though I am the teacher, I'm part of
Right,
the
right,
group because I always learn something from my students. Every time I
right,
teach
right,
something, I learn from
right,
them.
right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Um, there's a lot of queer people that have had spiritual or religious trauma, or have had issues with their families not accepting them. And this happens a lot with gay men of color whose families have, have joined the church and are very religious, and they, don't want anything to do with their gay kids, things like that. And what would your message to those people be?
My message would be to embrace your child, because you love them long before any phrase or any acronym came out about them. You love them then, so love them now. Take a glimpse, take a walk, go and visit the things that they like to do, that you may find offensive to you. See first before you start to pass judgment. And I talked to a couple of people whose parents were not, they were like, we're not with this, you're lesbian. I don't want. And talking to them, and allowing them to read some of the books and things we were working on it within our group, and talking to them about how inclusive it is. They see that there is really no difference. There is no idea in Ifa. There's no idea of a hell or a devil. We always say that everybody has their right to live their life, their truest self, and that we need to allow people to be happy and to experience all of the pleasures that they need to in this physical form. And I think for some parents, it's still kind of standoffish. They don't want to deal with it. But for some, they start to see that their child is not demonic, so to speak, or doing something that is wrong. They are in relationships that are loving, and they're experiencing spirituality that is also loving, and nurturing to them. And so I would just say to experience life with them for a moment. Don't talk so much, quiet down and just experience life, and to see what their life is like. And it's no different from anybody
Yeah.
else's life. It's an experience. And I told them that I would say, just for about a week, just be quiet and let them lead. Let your child lead you, and to
Yeah.
see exactly what they're doing for about a week. Whether it's Vodun ceremony, Ifa ceremony, whatever it is, just experience. Don't say anything, just experience. And then afterwards you can come together and journal about it, trade journals, and then, just sit down and process. Yeah. And you'll be surprised how often that works for people. Just to know that you know, because you don't try to shortchange their ideas about heaven and hell, right?
Yeah.
You let them see, because then you get into a shouting match, right? But
Yeah.
you let them see, and once they see exactly what's going on, then they have to come to terms with, okay, is this right, or is what's in my heart right? What I've been
Yeah.
taught, or is this sensation right? Which one wins? And usually it's the heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's such a great approach, because we do sometimes lock heads over ideas rather than
Hmm,
just
hmm.
saying, you have your ideas, I have mine. What do our hearts say? And I think that's
Right.
such a powerful thing. So, you mentioned earlier that you have a daughter that's queer. Um, what was her coming out like for you?
Well, actually, I have two, but the youngest one,
Oh,
she's the zany one. But so it was actually, you know what? Before all of that, I kind of figured, right? There was really, because there was a teacher
mothers
who,
know. My mom was not
right, right,
surprised.
right, right. She had come to my school for I had to sign off for an art project. And she kept saying, I want this, there's this guy in the class with her, and I think they'd be great for the junior prom and all that. And I was thinking, okay, okay. And so I went home and I just, passed it. I said, the teacher was saying something about, and she just kind of rolled her eyes about it. And later on that night, she said, told us that she was actually queer. And so we were like, we love you. We don't care. Oh, I'm saying, okay,
Yeah.
okay, we support you. What do you need from us? And the next thing was about trying to create a safe space for the students at the school who were queer, creating this club. And, of course, the principal and the administration, they kind of locked heads because the alumni were against it. What is that going to look like, for our school kind of thing? And it was a tough fight. I mean, she really was speaking on it and doing all kind of research. And toward the end, that was junior year. Senior year, they still said no. But when she went off to college, I told her, I said, well, then, when you leave, you're an alumni. So you have, so now you can say you're safe. And so they eventually did get the club, and so we were working through all of that. Still magic, everything played a part in it. And so,
Yeah.
when they recently got the club, she was in college, and she was cheering, so I said, yeah, because, you don't give up the fight because that's what they want. So for me, it was just like I said before when we were talking about how to introduce other people, you take the lead, tell us what we need to do. How can we support you? What do you need from us?
Yeah.
That's what it was like for me. It was never, oh my goodness, nothing like that. It was, what do you need from us? How can we help you? How can we protect you, right? Make sure you have a
Yeah.
safe space and, just lead us.
Yeah, that's amazing. And such a great way, like such the right way to do it, because so many parents do make it then about them and what they need
Right,
from that situation,
right,
not like,
right,
like you said, what do you need from us, which is just really
right.
amazing. So, and I love what you said about the fight doesn't stop. Like, they want you to give up. You don't give up. You don't like walk away
Right,
from it. Yeah. That's
right, right,
yeah.
right.
So inspiring. So, what else do you want to say about the book? I want to make sure that we really talk about the book
Yeah,
because
yeah,
this book has like recipes for like sprays and like just all kinds of neat
yeah,
like
yeah. I want to say that I want it in terms of, sexuality, of course, inclusiveness for all of us, but also I start off with the women and the nurturing, but I also include men, works for men. I also include work for the elders and for children. And
mm,
one of the main things that I really like to talk about with kids is, this whole thing of bullying, especially with cyberbullying and things like that. So
yes,
works for that, in addition to naturally talking to your administration and all of those things, but and trying to help kids feel safe with that because
yeah,
a lot of people with children who I've worked with, they've not just the bullying itself, but the night terror, those things of dreaming about the whole situation. So there's works for
yeah,
all of those things within the book. So I try to make it a community book when we think about, our families and things that
yeah,
we do and not be divisive in that way. So there are workings for them as well as for our elders as they move on and start to transition. We think about death doula care and things like that. And so, how we can make those spaces safe for them, as well as calming for us, taking care of them. So, those things are also included.
yeah, that's amazing. So I'm curious about bullying, like just kind of your take on it, because I, queer kids have always been bullied, let's be honest, but it seems like it's
Mhm.
become a much worse problem. Like, is that just my perspective as someone who maybe doesn't remember it as well being
No.
older, or do you see that it's grown more? And why do you think bullying is like, why is bullying behavior seem to be on the rise?
Right. I see it. I see a lot more of it too. At working in elementary school, I've worked in high schools as well. But I think because it's easy, a lot of the parents are doing it to each other. They're modeling their parents' behavior. I know before the pandemic, right? Where I worked, it was we had smaller cases of it, right? And then after the pandemic, everybody's coming back choosing sides, right? I'm with
Hmm.
Trump, I'm with this, I'm doing this. And so then it became easier. So everything that they felt like they associated with being elitist, right? they were against everything else. And so that whether it was, queer kids, whether it was, African Americans, Latinos, whatever, it just became a bigger issue. And I think a lot of it had to do with that, us being at home, feeding back into the media, and the families feeding the children that same information, right? And so when
Yeah.
they go back to school, you have this just powder keg of hate, that's stewing. And so I think for me, that's what I saw. Because some of the same kids,
Yeah.
right, who I would see before the pandemic, they were not like that. And then afterwards, there's a lot of this, I don't want to work with this kid. I don't want to, and you're thinking, where did that come from? What was going on
Yeah.
during lockdown? So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. How do you think we as a people, as a country, get over this like division and hatred and start to move forward together?
I think we just have to keep saying our say. We have to keep talking about the issues, even though they say don't talk about them, right? Because we know that the reason when we talk about them, it must work. It must be bothering someone that they want us to shut up,
Yeah.
So I think we have to keep talking about race relations. We have to keep talking about homophobia and all of these different, we have to keep saying it, we have to keep, it out there. We have to keep having the librarian, the ladies in the library and reading, the transgender women reading in the library. We have to keep doing these things so that they can keep seeing that we're not going to shy and go away. It's not going to go away until we address it. And once, they say, okay, we've had enough. We see you now, then we can
Yeah.
start to talk about, what those issues are and how we can get past them. But we can't just shy away from it. That's not going to make it go away.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It's such a great answer because that's really what you have to do is you can't like
Hmm.
if you go hide, then they've
Right.
won. And yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. I could talk to you for hours because you're so passionate and your advice and your outlooks are so like grounded and down to earth and common sense. And I really love that because sometimes, you talk to spiritual people and it's like this sort of like
Ooh.
yeah, like woo, and yours is just so like grounded, and I really
Right,
like
right,
love that. It's
right.
very applicable. As we come to the close here, though, what parting thoughts do you have to share with the listeners?
Well, I just want them to be open to understanding different cultures, different people, don't, shy away from it. You can learn something. Listen, even if you feel like, okay, I'm a white person, I can't buy this book. Yes, you can. You can buy it and learn about the perspectives of people who have gone through some things and they had to come together to form this type of magic. Why did this happen? And then that may give you a better outlook on a different community that you probably just kind of disregarded. So I think for me, I would just say listen and learn from listening, about the different people and what they do and how they live.
Yeah, such great advice, and yeah, definitely buy this book because it's a great book. So,
Thank you.
yeah, I have my copy here. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm looking forward to finishing it. How can people get in touch with you?
The best place would be to go to my website, which is my name, Mawiyah Kai EL-Jamah Bomani.com, and then they can hit up all my links, social media, Instagram, Twitter. That's the best place to go to find out any information.
Okay, great. Well, we'll put that link in the description of the podcast. So if you're listening to this, just go look at the description and that link will be there for you. So what's next for you? Do you have another book in the works or
Yes,
what?
yes. Um, So I'm currently working on a book that is about hoodoo, but it is more about because the first book is kind of like an introduction to pull people in to sort of get them, if they're not familiar, even if they are, but if they're not, just to give them a basis on kind of like a roadmap on how to do things. And with the next one would be about, setting up those altar spaces and working with saints, but a lot of times working with saints are sheroes and heroes of our particular lineage, right? And in turn, talking to other individuals about how they can incorporate those heroes in their own path and
Ah,
enshrine them and use work with them. So yeah, that's what it's about. So I'm excited about that one because I think it will give people a chance to really feel like they're practically working, for the betterment.
yeah, absolutely. That sounds like an amazing book. Can't wait to see it. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for taking the time to join me today and talk to me and our listeners. I've really enjoyed this and learning
Thank you
about
so much.
hoodoo. And yeah, so thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This has been the Queer Spirituality Podcast with Julian Crosson-Hill. If you enjoyed this show, please consider leaving a rating on whatever site you get your podcasts at. Rating the show allows other people to discover it and be exposed to these ideas around queer spirituality. You can also find my blog and past episodes of this podcast at www.queerspirituality.net. That's www.queerspirituality.net. You can also there find links to the Queer Spirituality Facebook group, my various social channels where you can get involved in the discussion or send me your feedback or questions or things you'd like to hear on the show. Thank you again for listening and for your support. Bright blessings.